This is part 7 of What If Deku's Mom Died. If you enjoyed, leave a like and subscribe for more fanfic videos. Midoriya. Izuku paused, turning to meet the teal gaze of his classmate. The scarred boy turned, hands in his pockets as he walked away. Izuku took the request for what it was, following after his classmate. The two stepped out of the large waiting room, pausing in the shaded hallway outside of it. "You're strong, very strong," Shoto said slowly, turning and meeting the eye of his classmate. "But I'm stronger." "Maybe," Izuku admitted, the Todoroki considering the Midoriya. "However, I cannot afford to lose this." "Because of All Might, right?" Izuku, to his credit, didn't even flinch. "There's something between the two of you, I've noticed it. Your simple strength quirk. He looks at you often. Are you in his favor?" "It's not because of All Might." Izuku disregarded, fist clenched as his gaze hardened. "It's because I have people who've put their hopes on me, given their lives for me. I can't let that go to waste." "So I'm sorry, Todoroki-kun, but the sports festival is mine to win." Green clashed with teal as the two stared at one another, each sizing the other up as the cheers of the crowd began to roar. "We'll see." With those parting words, Todoroki walked back into the waiting room. Izuku followed him a moment later, a pair of sharp red eyes glaring at the door they disappeared through. A low buzz sounds, and the class stands as one, the large doors creeping open as they make their way out the doors. The roar of the crowd becomes deafening as harsh daylight shines down on them, the sun of low noon blazing and casting everything in sight in a bright light. "Here we have Class 1A!" Present Mike's voice barely boomed over the roar of the crowd. "UA's brightest upcoming students! What kind of a showing can this powerhouse class give us?" The roar of the crowd slowly began to die down as the classes lined up, the provocatively dressed Midnight walking onto the stage. Several catcalls sounded through the crowd at the sight of the R-rated heroine. Izuku, though? He was busy scanning the crowd, eyes trailing over the hundreds of faces in the stands. He found the sight of Endeavor easily, the man imposing and bright amidst the crowd with a wide berth around him. Izuku shuddered at the sight of the man, having never met him in person, and his sheer intimidation clear. "Shh!" The crack of Midnight's whip silenced the crowd, Izuku putting his arms behind his back as his hands gripped each other tightly. "Let's all settle down now," Midnight called, her voice carrying easily through the microphone. "This marks the start of UA's 51st Sports Festival." The crowd once more cheered, Midnight capturing the crowd with amazing ease. "We will commence with the speech of the student representative, Bakugo Katsuki." The crowd remained mostly quiet, even as the students started muttering. Izuku cast a wary eye at his childhood friend, the boy looking uncharacteristically calm. It unnerved Izuku. "I pledge..." Bakugo seemed colder than usual, his face set in stone. "That I'll be number 1. Izuku's eyes widened as a thick silence filled the entire stadium, an entire second of no noise as Bakugo's eyes roved over everyone, as though daring them to dispute his words. The collective body of first-years took it, beginning to shout and jeer at Bakugo. The ash-blonde ignored them, stepping off the stage. Izuku gulped at the same look on his face. Bakugo was not looking at anyone, like he was looking past them all. Another crack of Midnight's whip settled the year of students, her alluring gaze washing over them all. We'll start with the preliminary matches. All students go through that gate. Her rattan stick snapped at the now open gate, the class making their way there. It had begun. The entire year of students filled the thin hall, its long tunnel cramped with over 100 students. Izuku frowned, pinched between a handful of students himself as the gate behind them shut. He realized with a jolt that it was a race. Without further ado, he floated straight up and above the other students. "The obstacle course will now start," Midnight's voice announces, the gate buzzing as it swings open instantaneously. The students stilled in shock before they all started clamoring to get out. Izuku flew forward as Todoroki easily broke from the group, leaving wide trails of ice in his wake as several students used their quirks to get ahead. Izuku grimaced, noticing they were fast. He took a deep breath before blasting forward, easily tripling his speed and racing ahead of them all as the gut-twisting feeling of flying that fast simmered within. A low mechanical groan was his only warning, a large metal fist cutting through the air for him from above. Izuku slammed on his heels, barely slipping under it as he slowed down. Ice cracked and his eyes widened, the mech he'd just dodged, now encased in an entire glacier. Izuku glanced over his shoulder, the lone Todoroki making his presence clear as he skated ahead of the competition. A series of loud cracks and pops signified Bakugo also catching up, the ash-blonde's face set in a scowl. Izuku gulped, blowing forward as he pushed himself harder. He cleared the large arena of robots easily, a large canyon up ahead. The only means of crossing it was a series of ropes, ones that Todoroki skated over as Izuku floated over the entire thing. The viridescent-haired boy shook his head, pushing down on his speed and rocketing forward. His eyes caught sight of a series of lumps in the ground, his brow furrowing as he stared at it. As he did so, he wasn't looking ahead of him. The boy barely caught sight of a glimmer before he was slammed into by a wall of metal. He gasped, face screaming in pain as he lagged behind. Izuku took in the sight of a large guardian, its legs making the archway of the gate as it stood in protection. It wielded a large shovel, the thing that had hit Izuku. The boy grimaced, face setting as the crack of ice made itself apparent alongside a low series of explosions. Izuku once more darted forward, the shovel sailing through the air at impossible speeds. Izuku cocked his arm back, the limb beginning to glow as Izuku shot it forward. The metal barely dented, following through the motion and slapping Izuku aside easily. He gasped, clutching his chest in pain as surprise flooded through him. He noticed it, not swinging at Bakugo, the blonde, a low foot off the ground. Izuku grit his teeth, watching them get ahead. He darted down, now floating a mere 2 feet off the ground. He slammed forward, going faster than he ever had as he caught up quickly. The other 2 boys cleared the minefield easily, nearing the large archway as they sped forward. Bakugo literally roared in anger as Izuku passed them, flying through the arch that signified the end of the first course. "Deku, you and that damn—" He cut himself off as Izuku violently vomited. The 2 watched as Izuku threw up horridly on one knee as he retched. The entire stadium was silent, the winner of the first round expelling his stomach before them all. The Midoriya stopped with a rasp, coughing twice as he punched the ground. The entire stadium was caught off guard as the boy roared, shooting to his feet as he wiped the back of his hand against his mouth. "Midoriya Izuku wins the first round," Midnight declared, the silence being broken. Followed quickly by his classmates, Todoroki Shoto and Bakugo Katsuki. The next 39 students to cross that line shall proceed to the next round. Izuku groaned, putting his hands on his sides as he walked on. Deku and that damn quirk. Bakugo growled regardless, glaring at his childhood friend's back. Kachan, Todoroki-kun. The two looked at the Midoriya before them, the boy panting as his hands rested on his side. If you are going to beat me, you need to give it your all. Shh, as if I need to hear that from you. Bakugo grunted, walking off as he thumbed his nose. It's you who should start using your Al Midoriya. Todoroki replied coolly, stepping away as a stream of students started filing in, slowly filling the remaining slots. All 42 slots have been filled. The second event shall be the cavalry battle, the students murmured, all tired in their own way. Each of you will form teams of 2, 3, or 4. It will be a point-based challenge, each of you wearing one of these with a point total. The woman held up a red headband with a white digit on it. All of the top 15 will be given a headband, their value decreasing with your position, and the sole exception is number 1, his value being 10 million. Izuku stilled, looking at the tall scoreboard near the wall. On it was his face, with the large number of 10 million beside it. Underneath, Todoroki's blank visage with the much smaller number of 15,000. There will be one rider and up to 3 runners. These are the rules. The rider can never touch the ground, and the runners cannot wear the headband. Steal other headbands to win. Only the top 4 teams will continue. Izuku took a low breath, accepting the headband from a seemingly random boy as he gripped it tightly. Hey, number 1. Izuku turns, meeting the sly grin of a blond boy. Wanna win together? The cavalry battle shall now commence. Midnight's whip cracked loudly. The entire stadium watched in shock as the first place and his teammate started floating up slowly. What is that shit, Deku? Bakugo roared, sat atop 3 of his classmates. Izuku didn't reply, now floating a safe 20 meters above the ground with his blonde teammate. Remember, if you start falling, I'll grab you. Izuku reminded, floating simply beside his teammate, who seemed a bit more shaky. And what if that crass student comes at us? Monoma asked, staring at Bakugo, who was snarling up at them. Flex your toes, aim them forward. If you get out of control, I'll help. Izuku gave his teammate a glance. Don't think I've forgiven what you did. And what did I do that was so wrong? Is he not arrogant? Is he not simply lucky that the teachers showed up when they did? Izuku frowned, watching groups fight one another. Kachan is arrogant. We all got more lucky than we should have, but that does not make what you did called for. Monoma rolled his eyes. Well, congratulations for playing the moral bigger man and accepting your victory for this event. Izuku clenched a fist. Stop talking. Monoma shrugged. Silence reigned for several moments, the two watching the combat below them. He's coming, the blonde remarked, looking down. The two watched Bakugo begin making his way through the air to them. Go forward. Slow. Monoma stuttered through the air, getting away as Izuku stared down Bakugo. You can't get me in the air, Kachan! The viridescent youth slammed on his heels, slipping down as Bakugo shot over him. Stop running, nerd! The blonde changed his course, darting at Izuku only for the Midoriya to snap forward. Bakugo growled, racing back after him through the air. In their minds, they were the only contestants in this event, as they had a race through the air. Oh? We've got a dogfight on our hands, folks, Present Mike announced, the two boys ignoring him. Izuku slipped away from the explosive blonde once more, Bakugo a hair's breadth behind him as he snarled. The ash blonde blew ahead, shooting through the air as smoke trailed behind him. Give it up, Deku! The blonde roared, the Midoriya arching up, and Bakugo scoffed. The boy angled his arm at an odd angle, using a blast more potent than the last. Izuku gasped at the feeling of wind against his forehead as Bakugo snagged the headband from behind. "Kachan!" Izuku shouted, spinning as the blonde raced away, grinning at him. "Not so quick." Bakugo's eyes widened as Izuku's teammate pulled it from his hand easily. He spun in the air, but Izuku already had it back around his head. "Bakugo, get back down here! Give up on taking that band!" Ashido shouted up at the blonde, Bakugo growling, even as he reared to go again. His forearm throbbed, and he winced. "Shh, damn extras!" The boy slowly fell through the air, landing on Kirisuhima's shoulders with a thud. "Oi, shitty hair, get me to half and half." "No thank you?" Monoma asked, smirking as he once more floated through the air with Midoriya. "You did!" Izuku cut himself off, slamming down and pulling Monoma with him. A tangle of green vines shot through where they'd been standing, the vines retracting easily. "Ah, Ibara," Monoma remarked, meeting the emerald gaze of his classmate. "We should be fine. Her vines are slow." "And her team?" Izuku asked, staring at the three beneath the reserved grinnet. Monoma let his gaze travel, and his eyes widened. "Kosai!" the blonde shouted, Izuku pulling them down once more as a sphere of air collected where they'd been. It's hard to break out of his air. "Anyone else?" Izuku questioned, warily staring at the group, now focused solely on them. "Yes, Reiko. We are not on a first-name basis." Reiko's voice traveled to them. The silver-haired girl's one visible eye narrowed at Monoma. "Setsuna is a problem," Monoma said simply, Izuku watching as the last girl split into several dozen pieces. "Watch out. She'll go for the band." Izuku's eyes narrowed, slowly moving back. The small chunks started soaring through the air, and Izuku blew away, wind whipping, as he once more started coursing through the air. He winced at the clenching of his stomach, dropping under the swarm of parts. He spun back around, racing away from the cluster of pieces and swerving around the green vines that shot through the air. His eyes widened as the boy from before floated into the air before him. "Surprise!" The rust-haired boy blasted out a breath of air, surrounding Midoriya with solid air walls. Izuku grit his teeth, tense as he stared at the boy before him. "Well, how are you going to get the headband, Kosei?" Monoma slowly grazed to a stop beside them, arms crossed as he grinned. "I was getting to that," Kosei snapped back, meeting Monoma's smug grin with a glower. "That marks the end of the cavalry battle," Kosei groaned, slapping his face with a grimace as the air dissolved. "How long will you keep my quirk?" Monoma scratched his cheek, feet touching the ground for the first time in 15 minutes. "Well, you gave me a free pass for the endgame, so I will drop it after school." Izuku nodded. "Thanks again, number one." Izuku scowled at the boy's back, the victory tasting like ash in his mouth. Midoriya Izuku managed to hold onto his headband. The teams that go on are as follows: Team Midoriya, Team Todoroki, Team Bakugo, and Team Shinso. We will now have an afternoon intermission. Izuku stared at the purple-haired boy who'd lead his team to victory, remembering the control the boy had had over him 2 weeks ago. "Ojiro-san." The tailed boy turned to Midoriya, his features saddened. "He controlled you, didn't he?" The blonde nodded slowly. "He asked me what belt I hold as soon as I told him. Everything else is blank." Midoriya nodded. "I'm sorry that you went through that." Ojiro hummed. "I look forward to seeing you in the finals." You're making them all look like chumps. Izuku choked on the water he'd been sipping, turning at the sight of his supposed girlfriend. Hey, did I scare ya? You're terrifying, he said simply, still slightly shocked that she showed herself. To be fair, he was in a public hallway at the stadium, so it isn't the most surprising thing to see her there. But still. And so far, you haven't even been injured yet. She quoted the word. I'll overlook your whole throwing up thing. I took a 10-meter shovel to the face. She shrugged. That's light work. He snorted, the woman grinning at his snort. And what classifies as an injury? She shrugged. Now that you're going to be in some one-on-ones, any broken bones, getting knocked out, that sort of stuff. You know how it is. I don't. Rumi quirked a brow. Uh-huh, sure, I'll believe that. Wait, I don't. He gave a small smile in response. Well, I'm not too impressed yet. Haven't really seen anything impressive. That's fair. Don't worry, I'll put on a show. She hummed. I'd hope so. I can't exactly publicly date someone who isn't even the best in their year. He glowered at her, the woman chuckling. Ease up, kid. She pat his head, scratching her gloved fingers through his hair. So, all I have to do is win, right? She hummed. Well, a good fight or two'd be pretty good, the woman remarked, watching as his eyes slowly closed. I'm sure there will be more than 2 tough fights. She nodded. Good. I'd hate to get bored. You do not thank me enough for doing this for you. She tapped her fingers against his skull, the boy's eyes peeling open as she smirked. Thank you, Rumi-chan, for scratching my head. I owe you my life for it. She hummed approvingly. That's better. Just remember that you just admitted that I own you. He smirked, emerald meeting crimson easily. I think I'm okay with that. She grinned. Well, aren't you the little flirt? He shrugged helplessly. You should be careful. Signing deals with the devil is dangerous. I'm sure I'll be okay. She grinned sharply. Miruko! Both turned, a handful of Midoriya's classmates appearing around the corner. Well, I'll be watching, the woman said simply, leaning in close. Try to not stare at my ass. His eyes widened as she smirked, a light hue on his cheeks as she turned away. He turned as well, catching the eye of several classmates. He glared at Kaminari, the boy looking past Midoriya. Astral wings spun into existence on Izuku's back, gaining their attention. I was just so awed by the number 4 hero, Kaminari said, a sheepish laugh as Izuku glowered at him. Dude, you're the one that might be going against him in the finals, Kirishima remarked, patting Kaminari's shoulder. The blonde whined in response. So, Midoriya, you think you'll win? Yes. The boy blinked at the uncharacteristic confidence from the green-haired boy. She must have promised him something if he won, Kaminari commented, drawing an understanding noise from Kirishima. Izuku remained quiet. She totally did. You shouldn't speak of our classmates' private lives like that. Yaoyorozu admonished, ever the voice of reason. Izuku nodded in agreement with her words. The 2 boys barely cowed. Hey, what costume designer does Miruko use? Ashido made her presence known as she bounced forward. They really make her body pop. I want mine to do that. I'm not telling you, Izuku refused, cheeks tinging as the pinkette pouted. Fine. What type of underwear? I'm not telling you that either. Mina pouted even more so. Oh, so you know what brand? Kirishima asked, grinning sharply as Izuku seemed to burn with his blush. It would make sense. It would also explain the condoms, Asui said simply, Izuku putting his face in a hand with a groan. Kirishima guffawed at his embarrassment, slapping the one-for-all inheritor on the back. There, dude. I think it's very manly of you to defend her honor. Izuku spared him a wry glare from between his fingers, the redhead grinning in response. "The third event shall soon begin." They perked up at Midnight's voice, the loud, amped voice echoing through the hall. "Well, that's our cue," Kirishima declared, the group merging down the hall. Izuku glanced down at his right hand, the skin still red and aching from when he'd punched the shovel. They step out of the hallway, crossing the grass and making to the large new platform. "The third event shall be a tournament of one-on-one combat." The crowd roared, despite the fact it's the same final event in every sports festival. When the opponent has either gone unconscious, touched the ground outside of the arena, or the match is called by me, the round is over. Are there any questions? Midnight-sensei. Eyes swiveled, the frowning but tall form of Ojiro meeting the stairs. "I wish to rescind my position in the tournament. In the cavalry battle, I did not partake whatsoever. I do not deserve to be here." Izuku frowned, staring at the tall, purple-haired teen who seemed to not care. "I also forfeit my position." Even more stares landed on the plump boy not far from Ojiro, head bowed in shame. Their classmates muttered, trying to convince them to reconsider, but the two boys seemed resolute in their decisions. "I have no memory of the cavalry battle. How can I fight in this when so many others gave it their all and couldn't make it this far?" Ojiro questioned. Ashido cowed at his rebuttal. "Very well, I'll allow it," Midnight announced. "As a result, 2 members of Team Shiozaki will take their place." Izuku groaned, remembering the nigh impossible to deal with quirks of that team. It was a brief intermission, both Shiozaki as well as Kosei taking their places. "Now, we will begin the matchmaking." Her rattan gestured to the large board, several faces blurring by before it landed on 2. "Kirishima Ijiro against Monoma Nato. The rest of you, go to the viewing booth." Izuku watched with narrowed eyes as the blonde made his way to the stage, grinning all the while. Izuku frowned, slowly making his way to the viewing booth as his mind blurred through its thought process. "Let the first round begin." Midnight's whip signified the start, and Monoma started running forward, Kirishima matching him. The redhead's fist hardened, swinging forward as Monoma swerved around it. "It's already over, idiot," Monoma whispered, still grinning. His own limbs hardened, and he grabbed Kirishima around the arm tightly. Monoma flew into the air with ease, spinning before launching the redhead away. It was remarkably simple, and all fell silent as Kirishima thudded against the soft grass, looking shocked. "Winner! Monoma Nato!" The blonde fluttered back to the ground, making his way off the stage as Kirishima slowly rose. "Sorry, Kirishima." The sharp-toothed boy looked up at the apology from Midoriya. "It's cool, Midoriya. He's the one who did it." Izuku nodded slowly, his friend walking away despondently. "Next, Shinso Hitoshi against Todoroki Shoto." The two walked onto the stage, Izuku leaning forward in curiosity at the matchup. "Out of Kirsch's curiosity, how did you get that scar?" Shinso asked, Todoroki frowning at the question. "I'm just curious. The son of Endeavor having a burn scar. It's rather ironic, no?" "Begin!" Midnight declared, the entire stadium still at the words of the violet-haired boy. "Perhaps. He gave it to you?" Todoroki's teeth settled in a snarl as his legs snapped forward. The temperature dropped as ice cracked and hissed, a tall glacier rocketing forward from nothing, ensnaring Shinso entirely. The entire stadium seemed paralyzed at the massive sculpture of ice. "What the—" Present Mix squeaked, 3 shards of ice nearly impaling him. Todoroki took a deep breath, frosted air escaping his lungs as he looked at his opponent. Only the boy's face was left exposed, his teeth chattering at the cold. "Winner, Todoroki Shoto," Midnight declared, Shinso shivering as Todoroki slowly thawed him out. "Don't talk about things you don't understand." Shinso said nothing to the threat, breaking free of the ice as he shuddered. The tall general education student walked out of the arena, Todoroki left alone as his ice began to crack and break apart. Next, Yaoyorozu Momo against Midoriya Izuku. Izuku blinked, catching the recommendation student's eye easily as they both walked to the arena. "Good luck, Midoriya-san." He nodded, feeling a worm of guilt in his stomach at the thought of beating the kind-hearted vice president. "You too, Yaoyorozu-san." She gave a small smile, clearly nervous as she crossed the arena. Izuku took a deep breath, recalling the words of his mentor as his eyes drifted shut. "Begin. I require you to not only do your best, but to win the sports festival. Win it with confidence, flamboyance, and above all, strength." Izuku gave a shout, golden astral wings flaring into existence behind him as the crowd gasped. The boy floated several feet, golden eyes glowing with unbridled energy as his entire body thrummed. His gauntlets faded into existence, thousands of tiny golden particles forming their entirety. Unknown to the green-haired youth, a pointed crown began to form on his head as well, ornate in its design and uncontested in its regality. Izuku began to thrum with energy, his arms glowing slightly as 15% of One for All made its way through his body. Yaoyorozu made a bola, twirling it through the air. Izuku flew forward, crossing the distance easily as she threw the bola. His arm snapped out, the capture tool wrapping around his forearm with a sting. Her eyes barely widened in time. It was over in an instant. His hand snagged itself in the crook of her elbow, attempting to pull back on his power as he tossed her out of the arena. She bounced against the grass, skidding to a stop not far away. "Winner, Midoriya Izuku." The crowd was a bit indecisive due to the sheer lack of retaliation put up by Yaoyorozu. Izuku bit his lip, forcing himself to not go help her as he turned back around. With a clap, he forced the bright effects to look as though they were blasted away by the clap. He ignored the slight tickling feeling across his skin as he walked back to the viewer's booth, settling back in the spot he'd been in not long ago. "Midoriya-san." He turned, catching Ida's eye. "I'm sure you are feeling bad for your victory over Yaoyorozu-san. Do not. We are all striving to become the best that we can. You should not blame yourself." "Thank you, Ida-san." He nodded, turning to walk away as Izuku frowned. "Next, Bakugo Katsuki against Ida Tenya." The ash-blonde scoffed, making his way to the arena. The blue-haired engine user landed with grace across from Bakugo, the torches of the arena shining against his glasses. "Who's winning this one, Midoriya?" Kaminari asked, leaning against the railing beside Izuku. "Ida-san's very fast, but Kachan's good." "Begin." Ida crossed the distance in 2 large steps, legs swinging around in a wild roundhouse, as Bakugo met it with that same odd expression he's been wearing for most of the sports festival. As if, "Shitty glasses?" Ida's eyes widened as his balance was thrown entirely, Bakugo's palm touching his stomach for the briefest moment. "AP shot!" The entire stadium seemed to shake as the entire battleground was doused in smoke and ash, a crack the only other noise as all eyes snapped to the opposite wall. Ida himself was slumped against the far wall, a large spiderweb crack against the wall behind him. Bakugo was left alone in the arena, looking entirely unruffled by the clear victory. "What are you feeding these kids?" Present Meek roared, the crowd slowly breaking out of their stupor at the tremendous power. Winner, Bakugo Katsuki! The crowd cheered at the showy win, the ash blonde not acknowledging any of them as he made his way off the stage. Emerald met Crimson as Bakugo leveled his childhood friend with a glare, slowly passing him as he entered the viewing booth. Half and half ain't the only competition. Izuku's eyes widened at the words, spinning to meet his friend, but the boy had already left. Next, Shiozaki Ibara against Ashido Mina. Begin! The acid-spitting girl slid forward, vines rupturing the ground around her. Acid arched through the air, seeming as though it was some type of macabre painting, as the acid burned away the vines with amazing speed, the pink-skinned girl not even slowing. Shiozaki stepped forward, attempting to use a type of hand-to-hand combat, but slipped on some low-level acid. Mina had her pinned and down the next moment. Winner, Ashido Mina! Midnight announced, the two helping one another up. Next, Tsuburaba Kosei against Sero Hanta. Cementos remade the arena moments before the two boys stepped onto the fresh one. Both had choppy features, and both were grinning crazily. Begin! Kosei dashed forward, running low as Sero ran in a wide arch. Not so fast! Long straps of tape shot out, before slapping against seemingly nothing, Tsuburaba grinning as he pushed forward. Again and again, straps of tape hit seemingly nothing, before Tsuburaba was upon Sero. He breathed, translucent white walls forming around Sero. The orange-haired boy proceeded to push the walls forward, shoving them off the edge of the arena and forcing Sero to the soft grass. Winner, Tsuburaba Kosei, the final match of the first round, Aoyama Yuga against Kaminari Denki. Izuku watched the two blondes make their way to the arena, eyes swiveling at the sound of a static crackle. Sorry about that, folks. We had technical difficulties. Present Mike's voice boomed, seeming to electrify the crowd. Here we got Sparky Spark Spark and Glimmer Glamour, all sorts of nutty quirks. Begin, Midnight announced, Kaminari grinning as he ran forward. Not so fast, you barbarian, Aoyama declared, thrusting as a beam of sparkling light emanated from his sternum. Kaminari leapt to the side, avoiding the beam. Pew! Aoyama shot another. Pew! Pew! He says pew, Present Mike announced, clearly on the border of laughter as Kaminari rolled into Aoyama's personal space. 400 volts! His hand grazed Aoyama briefly, the sparkled boy being launched back with an audible sound of electricity. Izuku snorted, looking at the frazzled and dazed Aoyama and loopy Kaminari. Winner, Kaminari Denki. That concludes the first round. We will take a brief intermission. Todoroki-kun. Teal eyes looked up from his water, meeting the green gaze of his classmate. Why is it that you don't use your fire? The boy clammed up, practically going frigid. If it's because you're scared of it, I hope. I'm not scared of it. Midoriya paused at the rasp of his classmate, the boy looking deadly in his glare. I loathe it. My left side, my father's side. I'll never use it. But why? You are keeping yourself from becoming a great hero. My old man, he's been number 2 for as long as I can remember, never able to surpass All Might. It became his ambition, his obsession. The boy spat, as though the word itself had offended him. Izuku remained silent, not knowing what to say. He arranged for a quirk marriage with my mother, her quirk being ice, his being fire. He created me for the singular purpose of surpassing All Might, to become the #1 hero. After I was born, he saw my mother as less than human. He tormented us, pushing my mother to the breaking point. She screamed at me, saying that my left side was unsightly as she poured boiling water over it. His hand touched the scar, Izuku feeling a phantom pain along his back at the words. So, this is my revenge. I've lived my life, never using his quirk for combat, so I'll reject him entirely by winning the sports festival without it, becoming a hero without it, becoming #1 without it. Izuku stayed silent for several long moments, his emerald orbs meeting Todoroki's teal ones easily. That's stupid. Todoroki jerked. For as long as you refuse to use your full power, I'll beat you down using everything I have. Because if you're not giving it your all, what's the point of living? Do I need a point outside of winning? Izuku frowned, thinking on the words. I don't know, he said at last, but I do know that that sounds very sad, and even more lonely. That's fine by me. The road to the top is a lonely one. Neither my old man nor All Might are ever seen at things like parties or birthdays. I feel sorry for you, Todoroki-kun. Shoto snarled at the words, spinning away from Midoriya's sad eyes. I didn't tell you for pity. That doesn't mean you don't deserve it. But remember, Todoroki-kun, I refuse to let you have a chance at winning with only half your power. Izuku watched his classmate clench his fist, storming from the hallway. Boy. Izuku stilled, an oppressive heat making itself known as he turned the corner of the hall. The #2 hero himself was stood there, face 3 times more, menacing up close. Shoto is made to surpass All Might. Well done on correcting him of his childish ideals. The sooner he accepts himself, the sooner he'll rise to the spot of #1. What about you, Endeavor? Izuku felt some sweat trickle down his neck at the sheer aura this man radiated. I will die knowing I created the #1 hero that was even stronger than All Might. There is no greater honor. Understand, boy, you will be a good test for Shoto. The time will come where he surpasses you easily, though. I don't think so, Endeavor. The man narrowed his eyes, shoulders flaring steadily more and more. Izuku tensed, the man's aura becoming near suffocating. Eh? The hell you think you're doing, Smokey? The aura seemed to pop as Miruko made her presence known, resting an elbow on Izuku's shoulder. You want some of him? You gotta get past me. That would come easily, insolent child. Rumi just grinned up at the man, his breath's heat felt by them despite the several feet of distance. It matters not. Shoto will make light work of him. Uh-huh. Your little tragedy case ain't making it to the finals. Endeavor's response was simple steaming as he walked away, his heat slowly receding. Thank you, Rumi-chan, she snorted, pushing off of him. I leave you alone for a few moments, and you almost get toasted. You just can't live without me, can ya? He rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. I guess not. She shook her head in amusement. Maybe I should put a bell on you. That'd look real nice. He rolled his eyes. Well, you're halfway there. If you slip up now, I'll get in there and beat your ass myself. He scratched the skin in front of his ear. Please don't. She shrugged. I guess we'll see. He yelped at her, pinching his ear, pulling him by it as he whined. Rumi-chan! That explosive brat is Kachan, right? I'm nothing like that. Got me! He whimpered, the shorter woman practically looming over him. Yes, yes, you're lovable and kid-friendly. She let go as he rubbed the lobe. Damn straight. After all, kids love bunnies. She reared in indignation, but he was already running down the hall. Damn cheeky coward, you can't hide from rabbit fury. Todoroki Shoto against Midoriya Izuku. The stadium was tense at the announcement, the 2 multi-quirk users standing across from one another on the elevated arena battleground. Spectators waited with bated breath as the arena practically thrummed with excitement. "The third round will now commence. Begin," Midnight declared, the two not even hesitating for a second. Izuku practically exploded in light, many wincing just by looking at him. An edged wave of ice rocketed at Midoriya, the green-haired youth glaring at it as it rolled towards him. Izuku shot straight into the air, clearing the wave even as large spires of the frozen liquid snapped up. The boy narrowed his eyes, ducking and swerving before spinning viciously. Ice cracked as the tip of the tall spike was broken off, seeming to float in the air for a brief moment. Izuku spun again, snapping out a kick that sent the spike hurtling down at Todoroki. The teal-eyed boy dashed forward, the spike thudding into the ground behind him with a horrible crash. Todoroki slid up a slide, swerving dangerously as he stayed stuck to the ice. It seemed as though thunder itself struck, the blur of bright yellow crashing down to the earth faster than most could track. The ground cracked and warped, breaking beneath the power of the yellow-eyed boy atop it. Todoroki stared in mute shock as Izuku smashed apart the very ground, cutting him off in his path. For a brief moment, everything was still as though time itself had stopped. Golden irises clashed with frigid teal in a clash of will. It's a shame it was so one-sided. Izuku snapped forward, fist slamming into Todoroki's gut with a deafening thud as spittle forced its way from the scarred boy's mouth. Todoroki's hand grazed Izuku's arm, ensnaring the limb in an iced casing just before he was rocketed away. The boy slowed his speed with ice, skating around the arena as he grimaced. Izuku's arm vibrated, the ice over it splintering and breaking away. The boy's eyes seemed to glow as his wings began to emanate even brighter light. Todoroki squinted as he tried to track the Midoriya before him. "This is the end, Todoroki-kun." The boy's eyes widened at the voice behind him, daggers of ice forming themselves on his arm as he spun. His arm didn't make it halfway before Izuku's leg forced itself into the boy's back. The recommendation student was rocketed into the sky, flailing erratically as Izuku followed him. It was unnerving, the distance between the son of Endeavor and some random student. A punch slammed into Todoroki's ribcage, propelling him over 30 feet into the air as they just started to eclipse the height of the stadium. "What is this insane fight? He's sending him to space!" Present Meek's voice echoed through the still stadium as they watched on. "If you'd used your fire, you would have won." Those were Izuku's last words before floating above the boy, slamming a kick into his abdomen and sending Todoroki plummeting to the ground. Shoto's eyes watered, time itself seeming to slow as he fell through the air. Memories flared through the boy's mind, memories of his mother's warmth filling him, memories of his sister's hugs, his brother's smile. Teal eyes snapped open, his left side becoming engulfed in flame as massive towers of ice rocketed up. They warped, safely catching the boy as he landed. "Shoto!" Endeavor's roars were loud as they echoed across the stadium. However, not even Endeavor's roaring flames could distract from the slowly increasing brightness. It seemed as though the sun itself had undergone amplification, bright yellow light beginning to burn away any darkness or impurities. "Congratulations, Todoroki-kun!" The voice itself echoed throughout the entire stadium as many forced themselves to keep looking, their eyes burning. Todoroki himself was staring at his opponent through a layer of ice, it acting as a type of buffer. And so, he was one of few who saw in crystal clarity the sight of Izuku. "Give me everything you've got!" With a crack like lightning, Midoriya snapped down, terrifying speed used as he rocketed towards the ground. Midoriya! Todoroki roared, both hands buzzing with power as he moved them, ice and heat shearing off both. Stop them! Nezu's voice was loud, and an instant later, towering walls of cement were erected between the two, neither seeming to be bothered as they shot forward. Gah! Midoriya's scream was loud and blood-curdling as everything became encompassed in a brief, blinding white light as the explosion was so thunderous that it was deafening. Students were rocked from their seats as with the air, the noise returned. Cement chunks were rocketed aside as the power used decimated all in its path. Tall, billowing clouds of steam rose heat filled the arena. The storm passed, people groaning as they made their way back into their seats while trying to look in on the aftermath. Who even won that? Present Mike's voice shattered the still tension of the stadium, Midnight shaking herself free from the light concussion. She whipped through the steam, parting the heated air. What remained was Todoroki held up by a cocoon of ice, barely conscious on one end of the arena. Todoroki-kun. Heads snapped as the steam parted. The sight of Izuku, barely affected, was revealed. His gold light shined bright as ever, and he floated steadily. You are powerful, far more powerful than me. But the boy thudded against the ground, astral visage gleaming as he steadily walked across the battered and ruined arena. His face was barely visible amidst the bright light, white teeth, the only visible component. I'm better. Todoroki threw a wave of ice, and Izuku slammed his foot into it, shattering the wave. He was across the arena in his next step, hand gripping the tattered remains of Todoroki's uniform and sending him hurtling out of the arena. The boy laid in the grass, clearly defeated. The arena stood still for several moments, mute shock taking over them all. Midoriya Izuku goes on to the semi-finals, Midnight announced, her voice breaking the reverie. Deafening cheers filled the stadium, the roaring approval of the crowd pounding in Izuku's head as he stared at Todoroki. Teal eyes staring at the clouds. Izuku gave a roar of his own, head tilting to the sky as he screamed his victory. This only served to encourage the crowd more so, their cheers matching his own volume. The viridescent-haired boy turned, walking off of the battleground and into the far hall. He never turned off his armor, disappearing into the tunnel. Young Midoriya, I'm astonished. The man cut himself off, as his disciple's golden armor cut off, the boy slumping against the wall. His right arm was a battered, mangled mess, a concoction of purple skin and dark blood, as the boy heaved in deep lungfuls of air. Young Midoriya! The man held up the good side of the boy, his battered form leant against his teacher. Come, recovery girl will fix you. Shattered bones, cracked wrist, fractured joints. I should have you in a deep sleep. Recovery girl huffed, the limb looking near perfect again. White bindings held the entirety of its length, only the wrist up visible, as well as the new scars that spanned that hand. That hand clenched fiercely, Izuku groaning in pain. Thank you, recovery girl. She tutted, clearly upset, but the boy hopped off the bed. If you put that arm through that kind of strain again today, not even my healing can bring it back. Izuku bowed his head, feeling the tight, tense pain in his recovered hand. I understand. All Might walked alongside the boy, the two leaving the nurse's office. Young Midoriya, not only did you force young Todoroki to use his fire, but also winning. I am very proud of you. Izuku preened under the praise, the man patting his disciple's shoulder. Thank you, Yagi-san, the man hummed. And think of it this way, I'm sure someone like Miss Miruko would be quite fond of your scars. Izuku ducked his head at the words. Well, I'll try not to get injured then, she hummed. That'd be pretty impressive. His eyes widened, even as she smirked. Well, if you want it too, of course. He winced at the memory, fist clenching despite the pain. He tugged at the fresh uniform, exiting the tunnel as All Might stayed behind. Midoriya! The boy stared at the redhead, the boy grinning brightly. Dude, that power was wicked. I don't think I've ever experienced such raw manliness so close. Hey, thanks, Izuku said with a small grin, Kirishima's eyes darting to the scar on his hand. Dude, that's sick! Now, Monoma Nato against Bakugo Katsuki. Izuku perked up at the announcement, making his way to the railing of the viewing booth. The king of arrogance himself. I'll show you the proper way to use your power. Monoma's smirk was riling Bakugo up, the ash-blonde growling. I'll kill you, he growled, Monoma's eyes dancing with mirth. What a heroic quality. Oh, I've just recognized you. You're that scared boy from the sludge villain incident. Bakugo twitched with anger. Ah, he pushed too far, Izuku muttered. Begin. Bakugo blew forward, rocketing with small explosions as he neared Monoma. Stun grenade! Monoma's eyes widened as a bright flash burst from Bakugo's palms, the stealing blonde's arm shooting up to cover his eyes. Die! Bakugo slammed into him before Monoma could recover, blasting him clear of the arena. Monoma floated just above the grass, panting in pain. Go down! The pretentious blonde's neck snapped up as Bakugo leapt off the arena. Bakugo's relentless! Present Mike exclaimed, the stadium watching the boy willingly leave the arena and go after his opponent. Bakugo slammed into Monoma, forcing the other blonde into the grass with another blast. Monoma Nato has left the arena. Bakugo Katsuki wins. Wow. Izuku was slightly intimidated by the fact that Bakugo had so easily bested his opponent. Who's left? Tsuburaba Kosei against Kaminari Denki. Ashido Mina gets a bye to the next round. Izuku's sweat dropped. Them, Kirishima answered with a laugh. Begin. Electromagnetic blast, 1,000 volts. Tsuburaba's eyes widened as a massive bolt of pure electricity raced across the arena floor, slamming into the air breather. Tsuburaba fell out of the arena, unconscious as his eyes swirled. The entire stadium was quiet at the lightning-quick round. Talk about lightning fast, Present Mike joked, his screams of pain audible as Aizawa kicked him for the bad joke. Winner, Kaminari Denki, Midnight announced, pointing to the boy who looked as though he were not even sentient. With this, we begin the semi-finals. First, Ashido Mina against Midoriya Izuku. Izuku-kun, could you not meteor smash me? Mina asked, the two walking to the arena. I promise not to meteor smash you, Ashido-san. Her shoulders sagged in relief, making across the arena. Begin! Midoriya exploded in a shower of light, crossing the arena in a flurry of speed. Mina sprayed out a stream of acid, the liquid corrosive and putrid as it carved through the air. The boy flew over it, snagging Ashido by the back of the collar and hurling her over and into the grass. Midoriya Izuku is your first finalist. Izuku gave a shout, throwing his fist to the sky as his astral armor faded into particles. Izuku stepped off the tall battleground, Bakugo coming his way. Don't go anywhere, Deku, Bakugo grumbled, walking past his childhood friend as he made his way to the arena. I'll finish this in an instant. Bakugo stood on one end of the arena, Kaminari still loopy as he stood there. Begin! Kaminari simply fell off the arena. Boos filled the arena, as Bakugo twitched. Bakugo Katsuki is your second finalist. Deku! His roar shut up the crowd as his raging red eyes met tense green. Come at me, you damn nerd! The very air sucked in on itself, Izuku appearing in a flurry of wind, ruffling Bakugo's hair across the arena. I won't lose this, Kachan, Bakugo growled, crouching. As if you get to decide that. The finals of the 51st Sports Festival shall now commence. Midnight's rattan stick slashed through the air, the calm before the storm. Begin! It was instantaneous, both meeting in the middle of the arena as Bakugo's fist reared back. It came about with a high whistle, Izuku's crown matching it in sheer brightness. AP shot! The explosive blonde brought it forward, slamming it forward and drenching the area in smoke. What's even going on? Present Mike questioned, the arena coated in ashy soot. It cleared in a blast of wind, the crowd gasping at the sight. Bakugo brought his hand around in a wide arc, the fist sparking as it raced for Izuku. The boy replied with snapping out a kick, blocking the limb and making the explosion go over their heads. The blonde slammed his free fist into Izuku's gut, the fist popping before blowing the boy away. Bakugo leaped after Midoriya and landed on him, elbowing his opponent in the chest the instant he was able. Izuku coughed, back-fisting Bakugo across the face harshly in retaliation. The blonde spat blood as he growled, Izuku kicking him away. Izuku raced after his childhood friend and brought his leg down in a fierce axe kick, catching Bakugo in the shoulder. The blonde gave a shout of pain, free hand flailing wildly. That hand found purpose on Izuku's wrist, grasping it and slamming the Midoriya over his shoulder. Izuku gave a gasp of pain as spittle broke from his mouth, Bakugo's boot slamming down on his chest. They're not doing this for the sports festival, Uraraka whispered, conveying the thoughts of her class. They're doing this to hurt the other. Todoroki finished, teal eyes watching the fight. Izuku gave an indiscernible shout of anger, slamming his thrumming fist into Bakugo's chest. The blonde gasped, only to get slammed across the jaw by Izuku's free hand, the blows sounding more and more concerning. What is this crazy energy? Not even Present Meek's voice could distract the crowd from the macabre scene. Bakugo roared, slamming his fist into Izuku's own jaw, blood splattering across the freshly made battleground. Bakugo slammed an explosion into Midoriya's side, the boy barely blocking it in time. Izuku tumbled across the arena floor, righting himself on one knee as he panted harshly. His uniform had shred away, blood dribbling down his form as he slowly rose. You just don't give up, do you, nerd? Bakugo growled, hands clenching and unclenching. Midoriya stood slowly, rubbing the back of his fist against his lip, blood smearing across his face. Like I said, Kachan, I can't afford to lose this. The blonde sneered. I don't remember giving you an option. The boy blasted forward, Izuku cocking his arm back. The crowd watched in awe as Midoriya's entire arm glowed, golden gauntlets becoming encompassed in shining light, while green electricity rolled off the boy as though he were a thundercloud. Bakugo gave a shout, blowing over the boy and avoiding the swung fist. Midoriya spun, Bakugo aiming a wide, glowing palm at him. Izuku flew forward, going beneath Bakugo and launching into a high bicycle kick. The kick connected, Bakugo sent tumbling across the arena floor. Izuku raced after him, feet buzzing with energy as he stomped down on the boy. Bakugo rolled away just in time, both hands coming together as he grinned at Izuku. Bang! Izuku was literally blown away, cracking against the far wall of the arena in a deafening explosion. The crowd gasped at the boy's bleeding form, Izuku barely floating above ground. "Didn't I tell you?" Izuku's voice was hard to hear for all, blood trailing down his face in dark red streams. "I can't lose this!" In that very instant, Midoriya had crossed over 20 meters in a blink. "What insane speed!" Present Mick exclaimed, summing up the crowd's thoughts. He buried his fist into Bakugo's gut, the blonde seemingly bending around the fist as spittle blew from his mouth. "High-Sai Crush!" Bakugo was launched away, somersaulting through the air horridly. Bakugo slammed into the far with a crunch, chunks of cement flying from the wall behind him. He'd carved a small crater in the wall, form slumped. He did not get out. "Winner, Midoriya!" The green-haired boy slumped forward. "Izuku!" He was unconscious before he hit the ground. That's the end of Chapter 7. I hope you enjoy the fanfic. Please leave a fanfiction of any kind in the comments that you would like to see in a video.